But in Australia, I think the family unit was supported from the word go. The maternal and child health nurse supported you in a place of wellness. So they were separate to the GP clinic. And this was where you went for your vaccinations, because they're bringing your well child to have those. And you went for education in those early weeks. You came and it was really informal. 1 week it was maybe on weaning, and another one it was on sleep routines and things that you could do to help baby, how to settle baby. All very gentle, all very soft, but all very evidence-based. And it was a public health nurse type person. So over there, your maternal and child health nurse looks after you from birth until school entry. And it looks after the family unit. So if there are issues in the new parenting time, that's where you bring it.
William, what a pleasure it is to have you here today.
Thanks for having me along.
Took nearly a year to get you into the seat. We were supposed to do something last summer. Then so much happened. Then I got very tired then after Christmas, took a bit of a break from the podcast, but we have you here finally, which is great.
That's all right. No, it's nice.
So you're a GP.
I'm a GP.
And you, as a little side hustle, because GP and 4 kids isn't enough work for you, you also have a business called Nest.
I do.
Can you tell me a little bit what that's about?
So Nest Family is me and other people. So my little family of people that I've chosen to look at postnatally, in the postnatal phase, to educate and support new first-time parents largely, but actually we have a lot of second-time parents too.
They didn't get the education the first time around.
But that's it. I was surprised when I ran the pilot schemes last year that we had quite a few subsequent parents, and in my head it was always based on our own experience in Australia and the first-time parents group there that everyone has. That's just the standard of care postnatally. And then we came back here and it doesn't exist. So you have lovely structured antenatal care, and then you have a baby, and then you're on your own. And many people are really lucky and do really well and have lovely family support. But it can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people. So we had a lovely experience in Australia, and I thought when I came back, why not let's try set up something like that, because I really enjoy that stage. I think that's part of the reason I have 4 children. I like being a parent, and maybe that is terribly soft. Yeah, I love babies. I think my wife loves babies more than I do.
I love them newborn, fresh, just straight out when they're like newling like little kittens. Oh, I love that. I could have had 10 babies, but
I like it all.
Pardon? You like it all?
It all.
I'll give you a few smelly teenagers now, okay, and I'll see how much you like them.
See, I haven't got there yet. The eldest is 9 and the youngest is 21 months. So
okay.
I'm not there yet. But it's just been lovely, and I wanted to see if I could recreate some of our own experiences back here in Ireland, because I see in work a lot of people coming in and they're struggling. I know the people that I see are the skewed, the skewed people who come in and see the GP because they are having difficulty. But you get a sense of it from even the people who are coming in for other reasons, that new parenthood and those times of transition, teenage years, not that different. Transition times are tough. And this is just something I decided to do, as you say, as an extra, something to keep me extra busy. But it's a beautiful balance to what I do in work. General practice is busy and it's tiring and demanding. I'm lucky I really like it. But this is something that really offers me lovely balance, and I really like it. Gives me energy.
So tell me what it involves.
So, it's such a long story, and because I'm so time restricted at work, outside of work, if you ask me a question, the answer might go on for a long, long time. Some of my closest friends will talk about the Hansel and Gretel sort of approach they have to take with me, so we have to drop crumbs along the way. So when I have them absolutely lost in the woods and lost in the story, now where were the crumbs that we can go back to where we were actually trying to go?
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, right. I'll ask some leading questions then. So when you had your children, you had 2 children in Australia.
Yeah.
And what was that like for you then? Having that, when you talk about that, the follow-up postnatal care, because there is very little here in Ireland, as in you have your baby, as you say, you get great antenatal care when the baby's inside you, and there's not much you can do with it, and then you're given this new human, you're told breastfeed for 2 years, do your squeezy exercises, and off you go. That's literally all that's what happens. And then you have the public health nurse maybe a couple of times, but that's it. It's very lonesome. And I talk a lot about vaginal and vulval health, and the pelvic floor health there is completely lacking in our society as well. But, we're hoping to make a change with that. But what did you find was the way they did it in Australia that you wanted to bring to Ireland, and what have you done in Ireland as a result?
So our experience in Australia, my wife's a neonatologist, so a paediatrician, and a lot of people said to us when we were out there, sure, how difficult are you going to find it? A GP and a paediatrician. And it didn't really matter in truth what we did. We had our first baby and we were no different. We had lovely support in that some family came out and, have continued to be amazingly supportive here. But we were on our own out there, lovely friends, great friends. The Irish gang out there were amazing. And when it came to it, when the door closed, we were there on our own, not knowing what to do with this child.
Actually, that is so funny, because I do think that people think, oh, you're a doctor, you know what to do with the baby.
No.
But it's and my brother's the same. He's a paediatrician, and it's like a new foreign object when it's your baby 24/7, isn't it?
But it really, really is. And when we saw something that we needed help with, I think we both struggled because we knew what it was, we knew what we should be doing, but we also maybe didn't want to accept that it wasn't going perfectly. Yeah. And I remember helicoptering around going, I don't want to say anything, I want to support, I want to do as much as I can to support, but this isn't my bit here, and this was all to do with breastfeeding.
Okay.
And in the end, out there, it was much easier to get breastfeeding support because it is much more the norm. There are lactation consultants everywhere. It is very easy to access them, and people spoke a lot about it.
Is it free to access them, or is it still private?
It's still private.
Okay.
But if we go back to, I suppose, your question, pick back up the crumbs. So in Australia, for your first baby born to you in Australia, or your first baby born full stop, and for us that was the same thing, once the babies are born in a particular postcode and you get to, I think it was 10, I'm sure it might be bigger out of the bigger cities, but when 10 babies were born in a particular postcode, they closed that group. So we were given, I think it was Wednesday, 12 o'clock, and we were told, okay, you're part of that group. And as a result, in a big city, all the babies were born on the same day or the day before or the day after or whatever. So only a couple of days really in the spread. And we were told to turn up at the Maternal and Child Health Nurse Centre at this time every week for so many weeks.
Okay.
And we did. And I could structure it to make sure I was there. And it was a new parents group. And I'm all about supporting whatever the family unit is. But here, a lot of things that are offered are, a mum and baby this and a mum and baby that. And yes, the majority of families are still a mum and a baby heading out, or a mum and babies heading out. But in Australia, I think the family unit was supported from the word go. So that person, the maternal and child health nurse, supported you in a place of wellness. So they were separate to the GP clinic. And this was where you went for your vaccinations, because they're bringing your well child to have those. And you went for education in those early weeks. You came and it was really informal. You went along in your small group, and you realised that you knew most of the people anyway, because you'd been sitting out for breakfast or out for walks, and, oh, sure, I think they live on the street behind us. Or we were watching and seeing, oh, she looks like she might be as far along, however many weeks gestation. And we knew of them, and we got to know them then, and it was lovely. And with the weather being amazing as it was, we were able to then continue on after the meeting, which was a really informally delivered education session. One week it was maybe on weaning, and another one it was on sleep routines and things that you could do to help baby, how to settle baby, all very gentle, all very soft, but all very evidence-based. And it was a public health nurse type person. So over there, your maternal and child health nurse looks after you from birth until school entry, and it looks after the family unit. So if there are issues in the new parenting time, that's where you bring it.
When you talk about evidence-based settling of a baby, do you not just walk around and pat the baby? And I remember one of ours, he had awful colic, and the only thing that would shut him up was listening to Johnny Cash, and me or his dad literally bouncing him around all night
until someone else comes to try their thing. I don't know, we went to a settling day or something we went along to, and they had us lock the front wheels of the pram, and I remember my mother-in-law thinking, to be fair, we both thought it too, but someone told us with great confidence that this would stop the child crying during those sort of peak crying weeks. And it was reasonably vigorous rocking, and I thought, oh, it's very vigorous. She's very vigorous doing that. And no, I don't think I'll do that. But we did, because someone told us with confidence, and this was a midwife who'd come from the Royal Women's Hospital, and we went along to a day This is what we were to do. And it was just one of those many things that we had in our armoury.
Okay.
And it sort of worked. We lived in a long, narrow house, one of the old Federation houses in Melbourne that are really common. And you walk in and it's a long corridor, and all the rooms open off to one side or the other. They're really popular house type. And when I would get home, I was handed our eldest son, and I used to just walk from the front door right down to the back, dump. And I just got into a rhythm. And if he was crying, I just got into a rhythm of sort of stomping up and down the house, rocking and stomping, and it stops. Time passes and it gets better.
Yeah. But it's normal for babies to cry and be unsettled, isn't it? And I think that's really important, because I think, the unfortunate thing is that people hear about, oh, my baby slept 12 hours from the minute we got home from the hospital. And, people have all kinds of tricks and all kinds of old wives' tales about babies. But the reality is babies are just getting used to the new world they're living in, isn't it? And it's normal for them to cry and whinge all the time.
And there are periods where we know that it's normal for them to cry, and it's normal for them to cry for, on average up to, hours a day. I think the helping yourself, and I say this to a lot of people, just something you said there jumped me right back into, a fairly standard, common, easy consultation at work now when someone comes in with, very common head cold, sore throat, runny nose type thing. And once I've reassured myself and then reassured them that there isn't any need for an antibiotic and explained why, and reassured them that, here we are in the middle or the end, or what we expect to be the end of the illness, my advice to them is always about helping themselves feel better while it's getting better. So all these things, the old wives' tales, the over-the-counter stuff, the, go to bed, cover your head, don't get up till Monday, whatever it is that you need to do to help you feel better, go and do that. And, I sometimes call it granny medicine, because there's a lot of great granny medicine out there.
It's all wisdom from people passing it down generation to generation, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But not the whiskey in the bottle.
Not the whiskey in the bottle, and not the dipping the soother, if you happen to use one, into all the things that they're dipped into. I've only seen that once or twice. The
glycerin and aniseed and glycerin was a huge thing back in the day.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't choose to do now, and I wouldn't recommend now. Was it wrong back then? They were different times. And nowadays, there's a lot of evidence out there. And I think we need to look at that and then choose where that evidence is going to fit in with you and your family and what works for you. As long as you're safe, evidence is evidence.
Yeah.
You're guided by that. And that's the very same way as I practice generally for all the different age groups that I see.
You said about the antibiotics there. I just wanted to ask you, do you ever encounter people annoyed that you won't prescribe them an antibiotic?
Frequently.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
In the early years, I probably worried about it. But, I was junior. You're not maybe sure what to do with that.
I know, yeah. It's tough,
But you become more experienced. And I think the great beauty of a GP is you've lovely continuity with a patient and maybe their extended family. So they will trust you. And there's huge trust within general practice. And it's lovely. It's one of the many, many reasons that I love it is they know, because they've been to you 6 months ago and you guided them, or educated them on something. And education is a huge part of what I do. And I really like it. In Melbourne, I did a day a week lecturing in university there. And I'd hope in maybe years to come to get back into a bit of that. Just educating people at different levels. But day to day, the little bit, the little diagram, the little correction of inhaler technique, the little something that you pick up on that they say. There's so much that you can educate people. A little minute here, a little minute there.
Yeah.
And then my particular thing that probably encompasses everything that I do is prevention. So prevention. I don't think overall we do enough of it here. I don't think there's as much time as we would like maybe here. General practice is very, very busy. There was much more time in Australia to do it. And as a result, I sort of got into that. So I have in my head that before anyone leaves, that I'll have one little thing that I'll mention to them. And sometimes it is something as easy as wearing SPF. Sometimes it's something as easy as bringing hats back into fashion. I'm reminded of that by you.
I love that, the way you'll say about SPF or something like that. So, because it's just a lovely, nice conversation, and it isn't like dictatorial or lose 2 stone or, that kind of way. It's like, and I think it is really important to have those conversations with people. And also, I think that you forget as a healthcare professional that you might know a huge amount about something, but sometimes someone doesn't quite get that, and it's about explaining it to them in a basic way, so they understand and they take that information home. Because what's the expression? You go to your GP and you come out with 10% of the information they gave you. So you need to make sure that whatever you say to them is really concise.
Yeah. Do you know what's lovely? My favourite thing to show people is the asthma airways. And I just put up Google images, asthma airways, and up it comes. And just to show them why you're using this inhaler and that inhaler, the difference between the blue inhaler and the brown inhaler, what they do, why you would use one over the other. And I haven't had anyone that has known that before I've shown it to them. And I think I happened to just do that because I think I was tasked with giving the asthma lecture to the postgrads in Melbourne or something. And I thought, that's a handy little thing. I haven't shown that to someone before. And now anyone that comes in that isn't optimally managed with their asthma, or if I really feel they're not using their inhalers correctly, here's why we're doing this. Here's why I want you to stay on it. Here's why I don't just want you to treat this acute flare. Here's the whole chronicity of it and how we're going to tackle it. It works really well, the little diagram. I
so get that. Whenever, I haven't in a while now, but whenever I talk about the blue and the brown inhaler, I just because that's the way I say it online, I get so many people that did not realise the difference or don't understand why the blue inhaler, although it'll give you the immediate relief, actually isn't great long term. So interesting. Okay, so let's get back now.
Get back.
I'm segueing away.
We were at the maternal and child health nurse in Australia.
Rocking the baby.
Rocking the baby to all things. But it was so lovely. And most of the dads were there for most of the sessions too. So you felt really supported as a unit. This was really new to me, being a parent. It was nervy enough times because you wanted to be brilliant at it. You were excited, you were nervous, and we'd lovely support out there. You were exhausted. I was back to work. It's such an exciting time for us. So we met out there.
Oh, did you?
We met, okay. We met out there. And
is Margaret Irish?
She's Irish.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we were everyone, the extended families were sending up prayers of thanks that I met someone Irish.
Oh, I'd say so.
The chances of me coming home were higher.
My brother's still out there with his wife who's Irish. We're trying to encourage them home. We're like, we'll be really nice. We'll babysit for free forever.
It's hard. Most of the friends that are out there now, once they're there more than 7, 8, 9 years, and if they've children that are maybe in school, I can see why it would be very easy. Now, we chose to come home, and I think it's definitely been the right choice for us. Do we miss it? Yes, we miss lots of aspects of it, but I would say I knew that I didn't want to grow old out there because I, in my head, had my expectation for what growing old was like, and that was going to be, I don't know, really. It was going to, but it was set in an Irish picture. It didn't seem natural for it to be by the beach. It was a wonderful time in our lives, really amazing, and has given us so much as a couple, and to start off our family out there, and to have time on our own, getting to know one another without family in a way. And it was lovely. They visited, but then we got to come home and have 2 more children here. But back to the maternal and child health nurse. So we had the weeks. I remember one week actually, the speaker that came in, sometimes a speaker came in as well as the maternal and child health nurse, and one of them was a parent who had been through, I think from memory, maybe she had 5 children, and she came in with the standard IKEA high chair folded up, the one with the sort of splayed out legs that you're always tripping over.
Yes.
And she came in with that, and the legs taken apart, and this child under her arm, and she was an anaesthetist at one of the local hospitals. And I thought, what's she coming in now for? This was her youngest child, maybe 18 months old or so, I don't know exactly, but around there. And she came in to talk about choking and the airways and how, really they have an amazing ability to just open up and dilate the airway if they're choking. And either something will come from below to push it up and out, or it will be allowed down. And here was the child under the arm into the high chair. She set it up. It appeared as if she did it all with one hand. And she was just really slick. And I thought, here she is. She's very calm. And here we were maybe towards the end of the sessions. And she was talking about choking in the airways. And this was around a point where maybe weaning was the next challenge on our list. I was like, oh, great. She was so calm. She was a great speaker. And she just came along for 20 minutes out of the hour or so. And then we went off for coffee or wherever we went to the park. It just worked. And even now, years later, there's one family in particular that we're still in touch with. And they've taken time off to take a year out and travel around Australia, as is, done reasonably commonly in Australia. You head off with your children and you homeschool them and for the year.
A friend of mine who's living out there did that.
Amazing.
She headed off for like 6 months or something, took the kids out of school, and like
the schools posts the stuff there's an agreement in the rural post offices, and they post it to a point, and it'll be there for you with the next assignments. You leave in stuff and it'll be sent back.
Wow, it's really forward thinking, isn't it?
It's really forward thinking.
Imagine that happening in Ireland. All traipsing down to British Bay for
You'd have done the lap of Ireland so many times.
I know.
Like, they started off in Melbourne and they're around Exmouth now, so sort of maybe halfway up the west coast.
Okay.
And social media allows us to keep in touch. But that family we're still in touch with.
Okay.
Through that connection of their eldest and our eldest being born within days of one another.
Okay.
It's a really special time. And it was a great start for us to do that in a group with other lovely people who were on our journey with us.
Yeah.
Because they were also starting into first-time new parenthood. And that's what I think, having come back, that's what I see is missing here. So that's where, there's the long answer to your question. That's where the whole idea for Nest Family came from.
Okay. Well, I do agree with you. It can be a lonely time having a new baby, particularly because nowadays, and I said this before on a podcast, I think, nowadays you're very much by yourself. Like when I had my babies, it wasn't at the same time as my friends. They were either a couple of years older or younger or something. And I'm on an estate and no one else is there with children or children my own baby's age. But when we grew up, like our house was like a train station. Sure, the neighbours would come in the back door while we were eating dinner and sit up and pull it and have a cup of coffee beside you while you're eating your dinner. And it was all very communal. Or if mum went to the shops, our next door neighbour would be like minding us looking out in the street. That doesn't really happen anymore. You feel you have to pay everyone that is going to look after your child for an hour.
Like it's not the way anymore.
No. Because that community around children, because it takes a village, is missing.
Yeah.
And it can cause awful loneliness, and it can cause a huge strain on a marriage, on a relationship, can't it?
Well, I think it can, yeah, I agree. I think the way of old was wonderful in so many ways. I mean, I love that I'm living now with the opportunities for travel and all of that, but yeah, there's some people doing lovely work in this space as well, and one particular person, Karen Prunty, Little Roo.
Oh, I know Karen. She's great. Yeah, I did a little talk with her.
Talks about your tribe.
Yes.
And then the Baby Tribe podcast and finding your village. It all means the same thing. It's trying to connect people with one another in that same space. You're right. A lot of it is now in paid groups or in structured time slots, and it's not just opening the door and all being in the same space.
It wasn't even open. It was literally the doors were open. They just walked through the threshold. Yeah. That's how. Yeah, and it was lovely because there was always someone to look after a child somewhere on the street. Like maybe it wasn't such a good idea when you think about it all, but. Different times. They really were.
And you couldn't compare it to now. Yeah, it's hard.
So when you set up Nest, what does that involve? And have you got this little community for people, and how do you bring them along on the journey?
So initially I wanted to recreate what we had. So I went out on a great big tour over 2 or 3 months and visited parish halls and community centres in the greater Dublin area, just because I was based here, and I thought, right, that's what I'll do. And these will be nice places in the community, because that's where I really wanted to provide this for people. So I had places all around the outskirts of Dublin, really. And I had enough speakers that I felt I was going to be able to host these education sessions. I know that sounds very formal, but really very informally catch up, drop in, have a bit of a
like mother and toddler group, but with a bit more education behind it.
With a bit more education behind it, and a sort of a theme per week. So that's what Nest has become. It was all to be face to face. And then I was ready to go in the sort of month or two before COVID happened. And I remember saying to someone, and this was, along with working full-time as a GP then and still now, I remember a friend of mine who works in hospital saying to me, did you hear about this flu thing or something to do with China? And every so often he'll joke and remind me of my answer. I said, that'll come and go, like 6 weeks' time, that'll be... And it didn't, and not to trivialise the awfulness of COVID in those times and how much harm it has done in lots of different ways to lots of different people. But I'm glad I didn't launch then. I think that would have been
the beginning
really
of the
hard
end.
Because I put so much energy into it. So I just left it, and COVID was really, really busy in general practice. So I did nothing. And now what I've launched is an online program. It's 9 weeks, and it's me and a person each week. So it's Saturday morning. And that was because all of the surveys that I did were telling me that Saturday morning is when people wanted it, because I want to access both parents. And that was the time that, for most people that are working Monday to Friday, obviously people work other times. But if I wanted to attract both people into that space and educate people to do it together. So, I looked for bylines and taglines and all these things that you're supposed to have. And I struggled for a while because I'm not a marketing person, and I really wanted to pour myself into it. It needed to be me putting this all together. I really wanted that to be one of the great strong points of Nest, was me bringing me and my energy and my love for parenting and my love for this time of my life, to be honest. So let's do this together was what I came up with. It sounds like I put a huge time into it, but it's actually very simple. And I remember when I was just, over weeks, things going in and out of my head. And I remember when it came to me that was what it was going to be, I said, brilliant, this is so simple. But it highlights that what I'm really focusing on is creating an emotional roof over the child's head. And that's an educational roof. And it's a structure and a safe roof. And it's all of those things wrapped up into one. So that term may not have been coined by, but certainly I heard it first from a psychiatrist in Melbourne who I worked with, and has done some video work for the video library that exists on the website to go along with the sort of live online sessions weekly, Matthew Roberts. And he's a fatherhood psychiatrist. So in a place like Melbourne, or a place like Australia,
Fatherhood psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So he looks after the fathers, does he?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
This is a British
You can't even get a human psychiatrist here in Ireland.
Here. I just thought Melbourne was, quirky and trendy and, in the ways that Ireland has become. But when we went out there, I certainly wasn't. I still am not. But I remember someone mentioning him through work, and then I just looked up to see who was this fatherhood psychiatrist, what's that? So I met him at a talk, a GP education talk, and I went over to him and spoke with him. And so he's a British GP, maybe, or a British psychiatrist. He might be a couple of years older than me, but not many. And he found that he was working as a perinatal psychiatrist. That was his area of specialty, and he would have new parents coming along, many of which were new mums. And he found over the years that he really found himself attracted to the postnatal depression and that sort of transitional or reactive depression in the dads. So, big city, and he could just
And I'll tell you now, it does happen. Men do get postnatal depression when their babies are born or shortly thereafter. It does happen. I've seen it. I know it happens.
I think it's just a massive shock.
It is. It's huge. And it's, so tell me actually a little bit about men and parenting and how they can struggle, because I don't think it's talked about enough, is it?
No.
And the focus obviously is on the mother, and it's really important, and there probably in Ireland isn't enough focus on the mother either. But I'd love to talk a little bit about the men's side of things and what you see and what, we need to be a little bit more aware of.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to talk about. I think it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I would say, and I'm thinking back to 2 in particular, 2 men who came into me essentially with the symptoms of postnatal depression. A little bit later down the line, presenting as difficulty within the relationship, withdrawal, not enjoying things, lack of motivation, the usual depressive symptoms. But when we chatted and got into it, it was this not really knowing what their role was anymore, and maybe not having a role in Irish society, not knowing how to be comfortable with their own role. And there are many new dads, particularly now in sort of modern times, that wish to be involved but don't know that society is ready for them to, or don't know how to be comfortable stepping up and taking the baby. If they're out together, can they take the baby? Of course they can take the baby. But a lot of them are not maybe comfortable to know how to do it. I think they don't realise that the mums don't know how to do it either at the start. No one knows how to do it at the start. How do I hold the baby? How do I win the baby? How do I feed the baby? How do I change the baby? It's new, but the dad maybe never had a space for that in years gone by. So that's what I've seen. It's those depressive symptoms because they And maybe if I look at, say, a standard, the majority of new babies may be born to a mum and a dad, not at all to forget all of the other lovely types of family unit that are out there, and those people who have chosen to go alone or single parents. But if you look at, say, a mum and a dad and a baby or babies, often, not always, trying to cover all bases so people don't come shouting at me, often the mum will be at home where there is huge potential for isolation, particularly if they're displaced from their family of origin or rurally placed or whatever. Even if they're in a big city with people all around them, it can still be very isolating. But the dad maybe goes back to work. So that connection with baby, that time for connection with baby might not be there. Maybe the dad wishes for it to be there a bit more. It's very unsettling, and it's a whole new journey that maybe isn't seen or heard as much about. There's a lovely group in Tala from Lads to Dads. And
is there?
Yeah,
that sounds
it's
great.
really quite nice. And they're online too. They're on Instagram, and they just do lovely work, and it's real.
And I hear that men's hormonal balance changes as well post-baby. Apparently they release more oxytocin than they would normally, or there's all these kind of changes. Is that true?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've read little bits about it. You see little bits down the side, little snippets down the side of journals that I read. The whole pages and pages of stuff. I'll flick on to the stuff that I'm really interested in. But then I just read the long columns down the side. I don't know. Like it's a very exciting time, but the transition is very difficult for both. And
maybe we grow up in a society as well where maybe traditionally a man's own father may have had that very stereotypical role where he went out to work and came home and there wasn't much, done with the kids. Whereas now we do live in a society where dads are expected to do more. And maybe it's just so difficult for them to, take on everything as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think a lot about this. I think at times, when I'm cycling, so I cycle to and from work, it gives me great time.
He looks like a cyclist for anyone that's not watching.
It is an electric bike. I have to put the hand up in the air. It's pedal assist.
Is it?
I think it'd be very unfair for all the people that know that it is.
Okay.
I cycle to and from work.
I know, yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad you qualified that, actually. Yes, you don't make us all feel so
very
lazy.
Honest.
Yeah.
But it gives me lots of lovely time to think about things. And sometimes it's a throwaway remark or one of these memes you see online. And I'll think for weeks and weeks about the meaning behind it, how that connects with me, what it makes me think of. But I remember reading one and now I can't remember it. It would be a far better story if I could remember it. Like many of my stories. But expectations. It was about expectations. And really expectations within relationships and the honesty to talk about it and to communicate about what are my expectations of you as my partner? What are yours of me? What are the expectations? You start off, right? You're an adult. Even if you can go way back, you can go as far back in the story as you wish. Child, you transition through teenage years, and that's certainly more difficult now, I feel, with the way the world is and the access to the big bad world nowadays for teenagers. And then you become an adult and you're trying to figure that out. And then you enter a relationship and you're trying to figure that out together. And you're learning and all these transitions. And then a child comes along. And that child now within your relationship that you've learned how to be in as best as you can, and the ups and the downs and navigating all of that. And now the child throws, in many ways, a spanner in the works. Like, this is a joyous time. It's an exciting time. It's brilliant. But it's hard. And now the child is probably going to be in the early times with one parent more than the other. As equal as everyone tries to make it, I'm not sure that in Ireland it's as equal as we would like it. We want to try and encourage as many of the wonderful female minds back into the workplace if they wish, and to support that as much as possible. But I'm not sure that that's there. I'm sure you'll tell me, a lot of people will tell me, absolutely, it's not there.
Well, childcare being a huge issue,
yeah, it is the huge issue. And I see, even personally, I see how we struggle with that. We're fortunate in so many ways. We have a fantastic childminder, and I don't work Mondays. So I get to do lovely things on Mondays. I take them swimming and I go to clap handies, and, I get to do drop-offs and pick-ups, and I always feel it's a little bit unfair because my wife doesn't have a day like that in the week. She works for the HSE and it's 5 days, and it's an intensive specialty. But I love it. I'm really fortunate and I'm grateful that I have that. Full-time GP work is really busy, but it's typically seen, 4 days, 8 sessions is seen as full-time. So the Mondays I get to do some of the lovely parenting stuff. And it is really lovely. And it's hard. Yep, it's hard at times. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's all rosy. I'm a parent like all the other people that will listen to this. It's hard, but it's very enjoyable. If you can choose to enjoy it and choose to let the stuff go and understand that usually when you find it hard, it's because of something you're bringing along to it. It's where you're at on that day. It's the stuff you didn't get done the day before. And I've worked really hard on leaving that behind so that Monday is my day with them and I don't do other things and I try to just leave everything else. I'll get into the week on Tuesday, and it really has seen me improve.
I'm very interested that you said that about it's whatever you're bringing. Because I would often find if there's conflict in my house and I have 2 teenagers now and one 11-year-old who's just like a teenager. So if there's conflict in my house and I'm irritable or I'm tired, I don't have as much patience and I might fly off the handle. And then you feel guilty for flying off the handle because, they're just, giddy boys. So I find it interesting, but how do people, is this what you teach at Nest? How do people learn to leave the behind? Because there's so much stress in society now as well. There's so much expected of us. There's bills to pay. There's houses to clean. There's organic food to cook. Oh my goodness, all this, all this stuff that's been forced upon us that,
Yeah.
So how do people learn to do that?
You're right. The shoulds are really hard. I listen in consultations with patients for the shoulds. And if I hear a lot of shoulds, I should do this and I should have done and I should. It's very hard, and they heap all of this pressure on themselves that, it's coming from God knows where, everywhere nowadays. There's pressure coming at you. So how do they do it? Here's how I approach it, and I'm not saying that this is the way for everyone. It's how I've done it. Is it working for me? I think so. I must say the last year since I have acted, and I think that for me is the thing, I have acted to change. I've chosen to change. And I think you do always have choices. I'm thinking of, the small groups in society that don't have choices. But for many of us, we do have choices, and they're not choices that are going to be easy. But if we can accept that in a very lucky country like Ireland, most of us have choices. Mm-hmm. I talk about the 3 A's at work: awareness, acceptance and action. And I think if you look into any therapy, sort of different types of therapy that people will access, be it simple counselling up to, DBT or CBT or any form
DBT?
Of dialectical behavioural therapy, I think.
Okay. What's that?
So it's very, very different, and it will only be suitable for certain things. I think you need a certain type of patient, type of person for it to work on. So different psychologists will choose different modalities of therapy to train in. Okay. So, for example, if it is grief that you're working through, or if it is depression or anxiety, there'll be a type of therapy that will work best on that.
Okay.
So all of the different types of therapy, from what I can see, the common final pathway can be broken down into like an awareness, acceptance, action. So you have to first of all be aware of where you're at. Be aware of what you're bringing to that state, a state of anxiety, a state of depression, a state of unrest or unsettled time. And I think at times we put our heads down, we get stuck in the shoulds. I suppose you're brought along by the busyness of life.
Yeah.
And you take a breath on a Monday and you exhale and it's Friday. All of a sudden it's, April, and Christmas really was just yesterday, and it's a month and it's a year, and then your 40s, or you're in the mid-40s, and all of that pressure and all of that continues. So be aware of where you're at, I think, is the first thing.
I almost want to sit here now and just take a deep breath, because you're a very calm presence.
Am I?
Yeah, I'd say you're such a lovely GP. No wonder your patients love you.
I love being a GP. That sounds very soppy and soft.
No, it doesn't sound soppy and soft. I think it sounds absolutely lovely. But even just the way you're talking there, it's so gentle and almost like you need to forgive yourself, everybody, and not be so hard on yourself. And I think you're right. You take a breath on a Monday and you exhale and it is Friday. It's so true. And sometimes I know if I'm feeling it, everyone else is feeling it. Your life is kind of passing you by and you're almost like this passenger on this train that's hurtling at 100 miles an hour, and the next thing you look around and all your kids are grown, and you're like, oh my goodness.
And that's what everyone says. All of the the lovely patients in Australia, as it was for the first two, and they'd be so keen to give you a little bit of advice or a little remark from their time, particularly the older patients, their time when they were having their first children, and memories. And I wanted to hear those words and not just thank them for the kind wishes, and really do something about it. Am I going to change the world? No. Am I going to change my own world? I'm going to try really, really hard not to be another one of those people who misses out on their children. So the awareness, if we can be aware, if we can just stop and choose to be aware of where we are, good, bad, or indifferent. So let's choose to be aware of where we're at. You have to be really, really comfortable with awareness before you can take the next solid step onto acceptance. Acceptance is hard, and acceptance is that finding a peace with where you're at. Many of us find ourselves in places, is that in a job, in a relationship, in a country, in a space in life, in a lot of debt, with other struggles or addictions, or all of the above. To accept that is very, very difficult. To make peace with maybe what has gone before you. People will talk a lot when we talk about trauma. You talk about, birth trauma and generational trauma. To accept that, and then when you're comfortable on that step, you can move into where all the good stuff happens, and that's in action. So awareness, acceptance, action. And I love the space that I feel I try to be in quite a lot now, which is in the action space. So I'm aware that on the Monday, I'm not going to deal with the fact that the weekend was very busy and I didn't get all the paperwork done last week and I have to go in and get that done and I have this on my mind and that on my mind. I can't do anything about that now. I'm choosing to accept that. And my action is to have a really great day with them and deal with, yes, the giddiness and the tiredness and the tears and the I want and the, although I've them mainly trained into I want, never gets. That's courtesy of my mother-in-law. I want, never gets. So they start and then they go, I would like. Oh. I'm not sure why it's even important to me, but manners are important.
Oh, they are.
So action, if we can act, and that's where I want to bring us back to now. If we can act or get people to a point where they will act, then here am I coming with all of my lovely, really, really carefully chosen people in Nest family to support you. But I want people to start practicing the awareness and the alertness, awareness and acceptance, so that when they do choose to act and do something, they're going to act to not underestimate the power of a simple walk every day. They're going to act to make sure that they reach out in those early months. And I'm just thinking about, say, new families here, but I could think about anything. Someone that comes in with low mood, they're going to choose each day to do a check-in with themselves, first thing and last thing. And that breaks it all down. 5-year plans, 10-year plans, when you have low mood and things aren't going well, it's all a bit nebulous, it's all a bit hard. So how about the first thing each day that you do in your action space is, where in today am I going to find time to look at preventing future problems, but also to deal with what I find hard? How long did that take me to say? 10 seconds? You have a fair idea, usually, of what the day holds ahead, be it a work day or a non-work day. Bad weather, extra traffic, whatever it is. We all have a rough idea. You'll always have the unexpected, but we know what the day has. So where in today am I going to find the time for the walk, the run, the gym, the extra bit of batch cooking that's fresher than something terribly processed, or even some time to just do nothing? That's maybe, I think, where a lot of people my age or with young families are struggling. Time to do nothing. Are you joking me? Time to do nothing means catching up on all the jobs that still need to be done. So that's what I get people to do. Maybe break it down when it's hard, when they're overwhelmed and they come in struggling, regardless of what stage in life they're at, regardless of what the problems are. Stop. Awareness, acceptance,
How do you
action.
keep your GP consultations to 15 minutes?
I don't, I'll be very honest. You hope for a teenager with tonsillitis. Every so often they come in, they go,
great.
White stuff in the throat.
Yeah.
And you try a little bit of education there, but you go, no. It comes and it goes. And you do. Some of them run way over.
How do you do that? I wonder, actually, because I was whatever I see in the pharmacy, it's 100 times more different for you because of the fact that you're in a room with someone and they may be telling you, they come in with one thing about their sore foot and the next thing they're talking about their low mood and they're talking about the fact that their relationship's breaking down. How do GPs manage to deal with that? Because it's very tricky. I was in the GP surgery there recently with one of my kids and there was a sign up saying, you can only discuss 2 issues with your GP today. You'll have to make another appointment for another, so make sure you know your 2 issues basically, because we're not going to be sitting here all day. So how do you manage that? Because I see you now wanting to tell everyone this 3 A's. And if you do that, you'll have five patients a day.
It's really hard. And if there was an easy answer to it, GPs up and down the country, here, there and everywhere in the world would not still be talking about it. It frequently comes up in each of the practices I've worked at over the years. How do you do it? How do you do it? And there are signs that different crowds that you've affiliation with will provide for you for the waiting room, and they're all beautifully done. I think you get the patients you deserve as a GP. There are those who I'm in awe of who manage to be excellent GPs and run on time pretty much. I'm not one of those. I used to struggle a lot with not being one of those. But actually over the years you find you just get a comfort with it. You try really, really hard, but I never want someone to leave the consulting room and have a feeling like I've rushed them out, especially if that person had something important to say. It might only be a handful of times in a whole career as a GP where someone will say something to you, particularly some of the really important, maybe background trauma, and they might never have said it to anyone before. That's happened to me once already. If I was rushing on that day, if I said, I'm really, really sorry, we don't have time, as nicely as you can put it, it's really hard. It's really hard.
And usually it just comes in just at the end, just as you're about to stand
They've
up.
just been softening you up with all of the other stuff. And we all know it.
Yeah.
And it is difficult for every single GP. It is difficult. And the last thing you want is to touch into something and then for a person to get a sense that you were not ready with listening ears and then not come back. It's a missed opportunity, but it also possibly has put up a barrier to them coming back to you again. No, and
There's no magic answer.
There's no magic answer to it. But overall, you've quicker things that are brief, and you've things that are longer. Depends on the sort of the population, the age of the population of your practice.
But GP is so different these days than it was years ago. Like I remember the doctor that we went to. He was a one-man show out of his house. You'd go, it was just, you go there for years with, mum would bring all of us with our various issues and stuff like that. Thank God we weren't very sick. One of the kids had asthma, but that was about it. But now it's big practices. There's several of you in the practice. There's a practice nurse. There's a physiotherapist. There's so much going on in GP now too. So it's
but it's lovely to be able to be part of that family.
Yeah, no, it is, and I suppose it's an excellence of care as well, isn't it? Which is important because it's a multidisciplinary team too. Or you might have a women's health physician in there who really looks after the menopause patients, and then someone like yourself who looks after the young people. Know to siphon the young parents.
Well, you choose, don't
you?
You choose where you want to go, and that's the nice thing about group practice. I think naturally people are going to find their own spaces, and then you'll maybe spend so many years visiting such a doctor and probably stay with that doctor maybe, but it might have been their interest in pediatrics that started you off maybe as a newer patient. Or in the bigger practices, you definitely have that. I've experienced it more in Australia, where people will say, well, I used to go to so-and-so for all the years when my children were small, but now I go to so-and-so because now I'm at that stage where I'm perimenopausal, or that's the next sort of hurdle for me, and this other doctor is very interested in that. So you sort of move around. So it's almost like people have subspecialties within general practice.
There's a lot of that, and actually speaking to a lot of GPs, they've said there is this kind of subspeciality now that's coming in, which might make it more difficult because then there's less actual GPs who are there for GP and general. And also within GP, actually, there's a lot of older GPs retiring now, and there isn't a lot of younger doctors coming through. Sure, there isn't, because I think, like we all see, we all read, there's a huge strain on GP at the minute, isn't there?
There's a huge strain. And I think even if I look at mine, so I went to UCD and then I was in Northern Ireland for my GP training scheme, which was fantastic. It meant I didn't have to get a plane or a boat to come home for Sunday dinner, and it was easy to come up and down the road. The number, if I look at just my training year, there were 8 of us and only 3 of us are on the island. And there aren't any in sort of mainland
GPs
UK.
3 in the Ireland from your
from
class
the group
of
of 8. In that group of 8 for the GP training scheme.
Okay.
So that was based in Derry, and 8 GPs would sort of pass through the training every year. But that's I can't say because I don't know the exact numbers. But if I look at the number of people who've left general practice and gone to Canada, New Zealand, Australia being the big ones, and I've seen what life is like in Australia, and we need to encourage more people to see. I think I'm going to say this as a GP who really likes being a GP. The great beauty of general practice as a career, it is a lovely career. And nowadays you can do so much with it because you can be a GP with a specialist interest. You can get involved in teaching. It doesn't need to be 4 full days seeing patients. And if that sounds very confronting, you can develop all sorts of specialist interests and take general practice where you like. I think that's the great beauty of it. It is general. You can choose then to do clinics in hospital maybe, where you're going to be working alongside your hospital colleagues. Yeah, I think it's just a fantastic career. So I'm here doing my little bit saying be a GP, hashtag be a GP.
I can tell you love it.
But it is great. Like, I'm very fortunate.
Well, I'd say no 2 days are the same anyway. You know, it is, you get, and you don't know what you're going to see from one day to the next. Can we talk a little bit about anxiety?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of it.
There is a lot of
in Ireland, in the world. But what are you seeing coming in the door?
I'm seeing a lot of teenage anxiety. Actually, even pull it back a little bit. I'm seeing a lot of 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old anxiety. And then you have a lot of health-related anxiety in all ages, but probably more in the adult population. Young, middle-aged adults. A lot of that. Most people are very aware of it. So they have the first aid on. They're very aware of it. And they'll come in, they'll say, I've always been very worried about my health. But you do still get the people coming in with, the abdominal complaints or the throat clearing or the feeling of pressure in their throat or the headaches or the various different ways. And that's the real difficulty with anxiety. It can mimic everything. So
the throat clearing, is that a tic?
It can be, or else it's sort of a thing called globus. It's just this feeling of sort of pressure, like almost like a stuckness in the throat.
Okay.
And that can come, yes, with a sort of a... now, of course, it could be reflux or something else too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the pressure in the throat or the headaches, or you can divide people into, if you even think about yourself and how or where anxiety might present itself. The common thing, the butterflies in the tummy, but it can present in so many different ways. People can upregulate their systems, their nervous systems, and they can be just very hyper alert to sensations, and then tingling and pins and needles, and it can be brought on by the awful anxiety. Anxiety is really difficult, and once you start a little thread of a thought, I wonder, could I have this? I wonder, is that thing a problem? The thing that started off as real in many cases takes a life of its own, and then you've got the internet to help and guide you in ways.
Google.
And I'm not against Google as long as people know what the diagnosis is and know what websites they're using, and but you need an individualized assessment. And that's where I think, go along to the GP and tell them a story. Like, people ask me, my children particularly, I remember them saying when they were younger, what do you do? And I said, I'm a story listener. Now, for many people outside of work, I'm a storyteller, and the stories go on and on and on. But at work, I listen to stories, and over the years, you learn how to listen well. You learn how to pick things out. You learn where the answers are. Because if you listen, they give you the answers. And that's not just when they come in with issues that might be anxiety or not. Really, the whole thing, the patient will come. You just know how to ask the questions.
Just ask the questions and they'll tell you. What?
And they'll tell you.
You said middle-aged anxiety. So I'm middle-aged.
What does that mean?
What the hell are you talking about?
Middle-aged is always older than my current age.
Okay. Well, we're both middle-aged.
44 now.
But what type of anxiety do middle-aged people tend to present with? Is it, oh God, I'm getting old? And
I think it's the fear of future disease, because they're now at a point maybe where their parents are older, where there might be some burden of care or extra request for care, or fear seeing their parents getting older. And that's unsettling in itself, because that probably is your first encounter with it. Close up, you're seeing parents getting older. Not very nice to see. If there's illness there as well, or someone who used to be strong, the person you looked up to who was able to do everything. When you were a child, you look up to parents in that way, and they don't lose that. And now, perhaps, as they're getting older, they're not functioning as well. They need guidance or assistance or different levels of support doing different things.
Getting a bit
so
dithery.
it can be that. It also tends to happen maybe at a time where people are now getting stuck into bigger financial commitments, mortgages, decisions about schools and children and wallpaper and renovations and
all that exciting stuff.
All of that stuff hits you. You might be at a point where you're trying to move on within your career yourself. So it's the overwhelm, and people, all these different words and buzzwords and terms that have been used in recent years, but the overwhelm of all of that. And then something in the extended family happens, and then it's very close. The unexpected heart attack, someone aged 50, but they were always reasonably healthy, weren't they? Am I healthy? Is there something going on with me?
Okay.
And then in they come looking for the full MOT doctor. I want the full whole body scan. I want everything checked out. I need to know that I'm invincible. I'm 40, I'm 45, I'm 48, I'm 50. I've got, 2 children, 4 children. And now it's a worry, because your provider role for yourself, but also now for others that you've maybe got around you, if you've got family. Yeah. And now you've got, to be fair, a very real reason to worry. And that's often where it is. And there are a lot of people doing lovely work in preventive care and I'm thinking of Dr. Paddy Barrett, who's a cardiologist.
Oh, he's great,
in particular. He's just so focused on it and does lovely podcasts and newsletters. And his message is largely the same. If you want all these things in the future and you want to live a long and healthy life.
Exercise, diet, sleep, de-stress, don't fucking smoke.
And
limit your alcohol, isn't that right?
And learn to bend over backwards. I'm thinking of you and you're bending over backwards. I'm like, oh, she's going to crack.
It's the mobility. It's that, it's like Peter Attia, the outlive. It's just, and look, it's not about, I don't want to live till I'm 100 if I can't walk and look after myself. Yeah. I want to have that. It's that health span, lifespan, soul span stuff. So I love all this talk.
Yeah. But I see so much of it in your different ways that you're online.
Yeah.
And again, it can all be brought back to the same message. If you empower people with education and you guide them towards the simple things, do the simple stuff well.
And that's it, because there isn't a magic bullet really. And, and I think that sometimes the whole message out there is, it's just got so complicated, when in actual fact, because people do want to be told, take this pill or take this supplement or do this, and that will actually cure all your problems. But it's absolutely not the case. If they just ate well, slept well, de-stressed, exercised. But I suppose we're talking like that, like as if everyone has the time to do all of that too. And that's the issue. We're all out working. We're all trying to earn a crust, keep the roof over our head and stuff like that. So it's and what gets, put on the back burner first? Is it the buying the fresh food and cooking the fresh dinners? Probably, because it takes time. We all know that. Is it going to bed early? Probably, so you're not getting your sleep. Then you wake up stressed. So it's this vicious cycle that people are in. So I want you to tell everyone now how they get out of that cycle.
Sit down, get a sheet of paper in front of you. I love the pencil and paper stuff, pen and paper. Draw a circle, put a dot in the middle of it, and this is going to be the wheel. right? And for the wheel to rotate well and propel you forward, the spokes must go from the centre and meet the edge of the wheel. There are 5 main health determinants, and you've mentioned most of them a minute ago. And this was in one of the Australian Journal of GPs, one of the journals a couple of years ago now. I'm back 5 years, so maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And it was the happiness, every journal would have a theme. So this was I think it was the happiness themed journal. And they talked about these 5 health determinants and how important they were for young, healthy people. And if you put 2 people next to one another and they drew the circle, and from the centre, you're going to draw a line, a spoke of the wheel, from the centre out to meet 5 points on the edge of the wheel. The 5 points are for 5 determinants of future health. And you're going to assess yourself at various times through your, mid-years or those years where you're starting to think about this stuff. Hydration, sleep, self-reported happiness, not what someone else tells you happiness is. And it might be contentment, peace, happiness, let's just call it. So hydration, happiness, exercise, diet, and sleep. They're the 5 things. If you're scoring it, you could do this in so many ways. I could ask you to score it out of 10, 10 being amazing, can't improve on this at all. So
the way you say that is well, can't improve
on this at all. No, sleep, diet, hydration, absolutely brilliant, doctor. So when you're doing the circle, I just like the visual nature of it, and I do it with people. I just bring them in and we focus on the paper, and it's not them focusing on me. I'm not giving them the answer. In fact, they're going to give themselves the answer by watching me do this on the page. So I'd say, okay, there you go. So, and I'll do an XYZ version first. And I'd say, okay, X, maybe I'd give that a 5 out of 10. So my spoke is going to go from the centre of the wheel to halfway out. It's not going to meet the edge of the wheel, the edge of the circle. Okay, Y in my life is 8 out of 10. So I go, 80% of the way out from the centre out to the edge. And I say, so I'd like you to just do that now with these 5 really key determinants of future health. If you score really well with these at this point in your life, when you're well and you're coming into me to talk about maybe some worries in the extended family, or you want to get checked out because this or that has happened and you're a bit worried about it. If you score really well on all of these, it tells me that you're doing very well overall before I get your cholesterol result and your fasting glucose result and this, that and the other. And you're likely to do far better with any future diagnosis. So if I diagnose you in a year's time or 10 years' time with high blood pressure or high cholesterol or diabetes, if you've scored really well on these now, it probably tells me that you're in a space where you have focused on health, wellness, well-being, all the different words that we use. So they'll draw out their lines, but there's the plan already. The circle with these lines of varying lengths. So I don't need to do a lot of work on the action. If we go back to my awareness, acceptance, action, they're in the action space, maybe propelled in for various reasons. Someone has told them to come in, often if it's the men. There's your circle. So what do you think you could do? And then there you have your 5 little areas to focus on. So what are the things you think you could do to change hydration? And then I tell them that I'm really rubbish at hydration, which I am, and things that I do. So I have a rule now at work because I know my hydration is really poor, and I know I feel much better when I drink more simple fluids. So every morning I must have a glass of water. Every meal I must have a glass of water. And between every meal I must have a glass of water. So frequently I get to lunchtime and I haven't had anything.
So you've broken it up into stages of the day. So it's kind of like a trigger, like you remember it.
Yep.
Okay.
Lunchtime. Oh, I didn't have anything. So I will at work go and get the glass of water, and I'll have my breakfast one. I'll have my one between breakfast and lunch, and then I'll have the lunchtime one.
You'd be like Piddle and Pete all afternoon doing that.
That's all right. But I know that I feel much better when I'm hydrated, and I don't, thankfully, I don't have headaches or anything like that. But I just feel more, I feel more
alert,
vibrant and alert.
It is so true. And actually, sure, one of the main reasons why people get headaches is because they're not hydrated enough, and people don't realise that. Before they go for the paracetamol or whatever.
Absolutely. So do the simple stuff well. And sleep. Paddy Barrett talks about, the superpower is not getting up early. I really liked this one recently. The superpower is not getting up early, it's going to bed early. I was like, boom.
So true, isn't it? And isn't it the hours before midnight that are actually so beneficial to you if you can get into bed early? I know sleep is so important, but it's just people just find it so difficult. And it's almost like, and sometimes you see these things online as well where you say piss takes, I suppose, the mum's like, oh, you've just got the kids to bed and you decided to go to bed early. And then it's like you at midnight scrolling on Instagram. Like the phones are the worst, really, because when you bring them into the bed with you, it's just so easy to just, stay alert and awake with them. So yes.
But in the action space again, if you go back to you're choosing something, I am choosing not to bring the phone into the bedroom. I'm choosing to have it plugged. Like we all know these things because they've been circulating on the internet for years and years, all these things, often surrounded by some little funny comedy act or something that's funny, and you just scroll on by it. Choose a change, action. Action is where the good stuff happens. I said that earlier on, and I really, really believe it does. Action is where the good stuff happens because you're choosing an action that is different because there's something you wish to change. I'm going to communicate better within my relationship because this isn't exactly how I would like it. I'm going to go to bed earlier. I am going to stop eating the chocolates that patients bring me in. I'm going to stop going to the reception and saying, I really feel like I need a chocolate. I'm going to stop thinking I might have diabetes in the future. They're all choices. We do have choices. Sometimes it's hard. And people will look and make comments like, oh, sure, doctor, you don't need to worry about that. You're slim. I also want to be healthier. I'm just fortunate genetically that I'm slim. But do the simple stuff well. I keep coming back to these sort of things in my head.
It's actually easy, but it's not easy. So it's simple because it seems simple, but we could say to people, get more sleep. But they're like, but I've got this to do and that to do. Yeah. But it's like that. It's about making those choices. What I would like to talk a little about to you is the teenage anxiety that you say is huge, and even the 9-10-year-old anxiety, which is that's very sad. So why are children of 7, 8, 9, 10 experiencing anxiety?
I'm going to say, first of all, I'm not an expert in it, and I'm going to give my own experience and my own thoughts on it.
Okay.
I think often it can be because of a lack of connection with others or difficulty in connecting with others. So it might have been triggered by something that's within the home or outside of the home. At school, bullying, particularly in the teenage years, you see it a little bit where a comment is taken very sensitively at a time where there's such a huge amount of change going on psychologically and also physically. And then it just triggers an avoidance of school. And then you haven't gone in for a few days and you've built up something that it's so easy for the professionals, the adults involved, the parents also, to see it as, I just need them to go to school. I just need them to see that this won't always be like this. It isn't always as difficult as this. And it can be very frustrating because the parents don't know what to do. So a real event that often starts off as something small can be from their background experiences and can be being worked on or being grown throughout all their early years. It can be their lived experience maybe with anxiety in their parents, or it can just be a separate triggered event. And they're my experiences of it in work. I think it is, I often spend a lot of time, I choose to spend a lot of time with those when they come in when they're very young, because they often go on further than me for more expert help. But I'm so keen to do what little I can, knowing that there is some evidence behind some of the little bits that I'll be able to do, and do well because I know them a little bit, because I'm their community doctor, I know their family, and they're being brought into me because the parent trusts the practice, say, or trusts me if they know me there. And that again is, coming back to the real cornerstone of general practice. The person is already coming in knowing that they're going to be helped. So all you've got to do is choose to spend the time and do it kindly. There are lots of lovely books out there at the moment for children that might be prone to anxiety, and you'll be able to pick that up in your own child. You'll know, oh, this child is a bit more anxious than the other one, or they would always tend to be this or that, or they'd compare it to other children and you get to know your own children, and that's from a parental viewpoint. There are lovely books out there at the moment that you can use.
What books?
So there's one, the sleep scan, Niall Breslin.
Yeah.
He does so the body scan is one, and the magic moment is another. And they're beautifully illustrated. They're really simple. It's a simple story, and at the end you have the practice.
Okay.
There's another one, the green one. I would say it on the desktop at work.
Is it kind of like a little bit of mindfulness for them then? Is that really what it boils down to?
If you slow it down and you get them, they often are over-analytical children, younger or older. Deep thinkers, sensitive, take things on board. And they don't know, they're immature. They don't know how to deal with it. Their little brains don't know how to deal with it. And it is big to them. So being told, don't worry about it. This is in there.
Or don't be daft.
But that's not a big worry. Oh, why would you worry about that? So connecting with them. And if it is, say, the headaches or the tummy symptoms, for example.
So these are the physical manifestations of anxiety. So what are they? The headaches, tummy, the weakness or pins and needles, and then this sort of fatigue. Yeah. And do you know what? A hug. Start off simple, do the simple stuff well. Like you'll hear me over and over say the same thing. Jump into bed with them at night.
Do the simple stuff well.
Tucking in and stuff.
So I get them to own it, and I get them to talk about the power of their hand. And I say sometimes that hand is your parent's hand coming to give you a big hug with two hands. But use your own hand and learn how to put your own hand and own the problem. So your tummy feels a bit off and it's gurgling and it's sore. So you're going to put your hand on your tummy, and you're empowering them, and you're giving them permission to focus on where the problem is, because they can get so worked up and so wound up about it in that moment. Here is where it is. And just the comforting, people talk about weighted blankets and all these things, and I'm no expert in what's behind a weighted blanket or not. But I often wondered, I was like, oh, that might be quite nice. It might be like being tucked in, as I might tuck my children in on either side into like a sausage, as we call it at home.
Do you do different tuck-ins in your house? Because when our kids were small, Mummy gave a different tuck-in. There was a manly tuck-in where it was like serious work went into shoving, like the sausage roll, like you're talking about, which is a little bit different to the more gentle mommy tuck-in. So that's funny that you say that about the sausage.
Maybe just because I'm a really huggy person.
Yeah.
I think I would do a tight tuck-in in my own head, and that's, I'm sure, only where it is, because I want them to feel my hug all the night. Listen, I don't know where it's come from, but this is what I feel when I'm tucking them in.
Yeah.
Will they feel my
love around them
all night?
That's lovely to say.
But
sure, even to say that to your child, I'm tucking you in, and you're feeling it's a warm hug for you all night. It's lovely.
And even the squeezing of, the hands, and I like all, I have loads of different things with the different children, and we do different things for me to tell them, and just give consistent messages to them that I, as a parent, love them, that I'm here for them. And I would say that even now to the older two, 9 and 7, in a very throwaway fashion, and not necessarily when something is going bad or something is upsetting them. I'll always be here. And if they hear that every so often, then maybe when there is something big down the line that they know, I'll always be here. I'll always be ready to listen, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. You can always tell me.
Yeah.
And
that's important too, isn't it? It doesn't matter how big or small it is.
Always come and tell me.
I say, even if you kill someone, just come and tell me. I'll always be able to make it better a little bit. Isn't that right? To kind of say that to them. Yeah. So with the anxiety in young kids, and then we'll get on to teenagers as well, because they probably don't like the tuck-ins as much. We know that the mental health services in Ireland, publicly and privately actually, can be pretty shocking. So how do you navigate that as a GP when you see someone that does need care and is potentially going into a long waiting list, and how do you deal with that? And then what can parents do if they are on this waiting list to see a psychiatrist, but in the meantime they have this troubled child or sad child?
I try to work out what I can do while they're on the waiting list.
Okay.
So I ask people, regardless of what age and regardless of what the issue is, a slight aside here, and it's the same way I've always asked it. I come to the end of a consult and I realise they need something a little bit more than I can provide, be it a test or a scan or a referral elsewhere to a specialist. And I say, are you fortunate enough to have private health cover? I want people to recognise that it is a great fortune to have access to private health cover. I'd love if it wasn't always necessary, if the public system was able to provide everything that we would like as GPs to be able to get access to. And there have been huge advances in that, don't get me wrong, but there are times and I feel we could focus on it a little bit more. Back to your question though. I try to use the time on the waiting list as well as possible. So this might be someone that I know a little bit, or it might be someone I don't know at all. And in my chat with them, depending on their age, sometimes with the parent's consent and with the person's own consent, I might get half of the consult with the person, or maybe the whole time with the parent sitting there. But if they're old enough and they're able to use their words and talk to me, at times at the start they won't say very much. Like I'm talking a lot now, but I often go reasonably quiet and just allow them to say something, anything, and take what they will give me and see if that will allow me to work towards maybe a type of therapy that I can access as a way of getting them talking. So we need to let what's in there come out. And while we're waiting for the specialists who are real experts in guiding them through working towards the answer, maybe there's another type of therapy out there. So sand tray therapy, play therapy, music therapy, all these things that I'm no expert in, but I've seen people get real benefit from.
Okay.
And I think once you choose, we're back to the action again. Once you choose to do something to let this out, again, for most people, I'll say getting out for a walk every day. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need any membership fees to anywhere. Get out for a walk every day being the first thing, because often people will, in anxiety states, will often have worked themselves into an avoidant space. So their response can be, okay, well, I will control this situation. We see that in new parents as well. I won't be able to manage all this, so I'll just stay at home with the baby. I won't go out. I'll be able to keep on top of their sleep and their feeding and their nappies. And that's maybe in an extreme situation, but to be honest, it's quite common. In the teenage group, they'll avoid. So maybe there's some school refusal. They may be dropping some of the sports. They may be not hanging out with the friends because they feel awkward now in the group, or someone said something, or they just didn't feel comfortable, or this anxiety symptom or symptoms came on when they were in that group. And then it starts. And then you've built up maybe that you've been absent from school for a week, and then what would they be saying? And then it feeds, and the anxiety is fed and fed and fed, and it's difficult. So if we can have a space where that person can get thoughts, actions out, and it just depends on the child. Are they creative? Do they need to do, doodle and draw? And there's someone who's very good at that who can guide them through it. So sometimes I'll just get them to write a few sentences as to how they feel, if they're not able to say it. Is it because I've had amazing training in it? No. But I've got to a point in my GP career where I'm confident that I'm not doing anything to harm, and I'm allowing them a space, because in years to come, they may come back to me with something else. And I've kept the door open while doing things that are simple, and I've started communicating with them.
Okay. And is it mainly girls or boys, or is it 50-50?
I see more girls. The boys that I can remember, it has been more significant and more severe, if you want to use that. But I see more girls.
Is that because boys keep it to themselves a lot and maybe don't express that they're feeling anxious, whereas girls tend to be that bit more vocal?
Yeah.
That's a bit sad, isn't it?
It is. But the other thing is allowing people, and I'm jumping a little bit here-ish.
Ash, we've jumped around the whole thing. Sure, good. Can't even remember what we've covered.
Every so often, I'm thinking, she asked me a question there a while ago, and I know we started talking about it.
There's a couple of things that you've said, and I'm like, I must ask him, but I must make him follow on that. And then I'm like, fuck it, it's just the moment.
I'll have to teach you the crumbs method. Hansel and Gretel.
We'll just have to get you back.
Wood,
I'll have to re-listen to this and go, this is what we need to talk about the next time.
It's normalising some of their reactions. That's what it is. And sometimes if they come in and they've spoken about life not being worth living or suicidal thoughts, letting them know that suicidal thoughts are a very common reaction to when things are very overwhelming. When you feel really, really low, when you feel very, very anxious, a very extreme avoidant response is a suicidal fleeting thought or ideas of it, or what would happen if maybe this happened to me. Be it passive or active. And once you allow them that, if they've come in with that and they talk about it, often that's maybe something that maybe a parent brings up, or this has come up at home. So you have an in. But once you have an in, to let them know that it's okay, you're lucky to be seeing them because they're sitting in front of you, and you just start the conversation. Yes, Some of them will need more expert help. I know I've said that a couple of times, and I'm sort of very aware of where my limitations are, and they're huge. But to know how to signpost them to something simple, how to guide the parents. There's some great videos actually on the UCD website, the Department of Psychology and UCD, and I don't know, however many videos there are, maybe 6 or 8, for parents and teachers for speaking to teenagers. How do you speak to teenagers when they're maybe having some difficulty? Different little videos. But they're simply done. They're freely available. I didn't know about them for ages, and I learned about them recently.
Known about them. Do you know what? We're going to put this, and we're going to put the books that you've recommended in the show notes so people can access them.
Oh, I wish I had a big list, a true bibliography for people. I'll have to go and look on see, I have them saved
you
on
can pretend.
The what you call the desktop at work, and I just sort of click into my folder and I turn it and I take a photograph of that book, the green one. I don't know what it's called. But Niall Breslin's 2 are great. And they're great because I've used them, not because some expert has told me. They're great because I have found them helpful because I chose to do something. I was like, oh, there's a nice little thing to do, a nice little book. And at the end, you have that body scan for a child that maybe finds it difficult to just calm it down and switch off. It's quite nice. One
thing you mentioned there in passing was a new parent maybe not leaving the house because they have to be on top of the naps and the nappies and the feeding and the this and that. And that is quite a thing actually, because particularly if they're trying to get their kid into this routine of napping.
What's that?
So what's a napping routine? You know, they have to wake up at 7, then to go down at 11, then and mum or dad, whoever is minding the baby, is usually very, very tied then to that napping schedule, particularly if the babies love it. They love an L nap. So how do we, what are your views on this, on these napping routines? Like, so I would have thought, look, it's whatever gets you through the day, you do you, but it can be very isolating. So how, what would your opinion be on this?
I think it's so, I definitely don't go for, and I don't recommend any of the rigid parenting styles. I think you've got to choose.
You wouldn't be a Gina Ford advocate?
No. But you've got to choose what works for you. That works for some people. And I suppose I've got to remember that when, let's say, if both parents are back out at work, that in itself is rigid and routine driven. So that child will, after a short amount of time or a longer amount of time, depending on how that family unit is going to work, that child will have a routine. But in the early months, I think there's a lovely space for it just all to flow. Listen to the baby, just let it all hang out, because your head is here, there and everywhere, and your body has gone through such an amazing transition, and there's a lot of homework to be done at all levels for everyone. Here's this new child learning how to be, but there's also a new woman, a new mother learning how to be, and matrescence in recent years. There's some lovely people, really, really lovely, warm people doing lovely work in that whole transition, the rebirth of a mother, and people describe it in different ways. But I think it's really lovely because I think mothers do, in a way, a little bit more than fathers. It's a very different way. But birthing parents have a journey that now has a space. And if they're into that or looking for support in that area, there's some really lovely people doing lovely work in it. But I would tend to just listen to the child and see what works for you and your family.
I'll never forget one time thinking we got the first fella, because I told you he was a squawker. I thought I got him into a routine, because he slept for 5 hours straight one night, and that was just and because I'd slept for 5 hours, well, first of all, you wake up thinking, Jesus Christ, is he dead? Because, he was asleep for so long. And then you're almost so rested that day and you feel so good that then when they start acting up, then the following night, you can't actually cope with it. It's like going back to brand new parenthood when they start squawking again. It's the sleep disturbance that's the biggest problem, I think, in general for new parents.
Well, sleep disturbance and uncertainty, and then a little noise that they made once or twice in the dark of night. Like, the dark of night is a terrible thing, And was that a snort? Was there something stuck? Was it?
I know, yeah.
And you don't know. And I suppose it's that uncertainty that I am looking to prevent. I find myself sort of constantly circling back to the same points. Prevention. And if I can do that little bit. So, for example, in the structure of Nest, right? So 9 weeks. And I've sort of as much as I can, and it will change. It already has changed, and I've tweaked. Each module is placed in order. So you can do 1 or 4 or 6 or 9 or whatever you like. But if you do the whole 9, the structure and the order is in the order that I think the challenges present themselves.
Is it from week 1 they start, or?
Probably from about week 2, week 3. Because I think to engage with anything, to ask anyone to engage with anyone, week 1, you barely know what way up and down is.
Yeah.
So it's nutrition, first of all, and that's all sorts of nutrition. I would aim to try and see, could I increase the breastfeeding rates single-handedly? But even just to encourage people, I'm not. No.
Okay.
No, but just honestly, do you know how I would approach that, and am approaching it? When they get the big scan done, and they're now into, they're showing, they're now into thinking about buying expensive travel systems, and they're looking as far as
travel
delivery.
Systems, is that what they're called now?
That's what they're called nowadays, yes.
See, I'm so far out of it.
Buggy.
Yeah, that was it.
Jeez, that's what I used to call it. No, but now it's all a travel system.
It's a travel system, wow. That sounds really high tech.
It does.
Do these things fly?
Comes with many zeros, you see. If you,
I know,
you know
yeah.
what I mean.
That's it.
But so once they've that done, and I have not met anybody in the antenatal visits when they come to me that has looked beyond delivery the first time. To be fair, how can I expect them to look beyond delivery? It's all a bit, what's out over there? I don't know what's out over there. And they're overwhelmed with all of the lovely times. Thankfully, many people will have that lovely mid-trimester experience. There are some that don't for various reasons. But yeah, but once they get beyond that, you can get a lovely glow in the mid-trimester. And you're starting to think about maybe buying things and packing your bag. And you're into those weeks, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. And if all is going well, so when they come into me and everything is going well, or if there are a few little things that are being watched more carefully, I'm talking about, they're in there, they have to check their urine sample, we have to maybe listen to the baby's heartbeat and examine them and do blood pressure and see their ankles and various different bits and ask them how things are going. And it's a nice consultation. It often is reasonably quick because they're well and they're used to doing it and they're getting it more regularly as time passes towards the end and towards delivery. So I'll ask them 2 questions, and they're things that I want anyone that might ever listen to this to ask themselves. What can I do in pregnancy that will prepare me for afterwards? Because I see such a disconnect between the pregnancy bit and the afterwards bit. So I ask them, have you thought about how you might feed baby? And if they say, yeah, I'm going to formula feed, I say, that's fine. I have no issue with formula feeding. Mm-hmm. But if at all they give me a suggestion, or if I know them well enough to maybe say, and have you thought about breastfeeding or what it might involve, or have you looked into it? And I've had 2 successes where they came back to me afterwards at the 2-week check or 6-week check. One in particular jumps into mind, and it's such a lovely story to tell because it's just heartwarming. I mentioned to her in the way that I do now to all of them, have you thought about how you might feed baby? And she says, I think I should formula feed. I think most of my friends said that. And I said, something like, have you thought about breastfeeding or have you looked into it at all? No. And I said, if you looked into it, then you could inform yourself about both. And then whatever decision you make will be the right decision for you. But you'll have looked at both and you'll have chosen, as opposed to sort of fallen into one without looking at the other. And it's fine. I'm not going to push anyone in any direction. But if I get any bit of an inkling, it would be wrong for me as a GP and an educator to not provide them information, so I can signpost and point them to lovely people who are really experienced.
It's the way you deliver that message.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you're giving them the choice.
There I am, and I'm put on the blood pressure cuffs there, and they're quiet, and or maybe you're there and you're listening to the baby's heartbeat, but in that space, in a trusted space, they know you, they've seen you 3 times recently for the same thing anyway, or maybe as the really experienced GPs, they delivered you, or you've been their family doctor forever, and I don't have that yet. But asking them that, and I might point them towards some people who are doing lovely work online, talking about expressing antenatally, what is colostrum, how you might go in armed with a few mils of this stuff, and how amazing that would be. I
think that's hardcore, as in just...
That is hardcore, and it's not for everyone, and that's not the message I want to put out. But if someone asks me, and I sort of throw it all out there as a bit of a world to look into.
Yeah.
And there are antenatal education classes about pain relief options, which is the other thing I ask people about. Have you looked into the different pain relief options that are available to you in labour? And everyone knows about an epidural. Not as many people know about the TENS machine as I feel they should in Ireland. I'm not sure what should is about, but right, what's that, doctor? Okay, I'll tell them about that. 2 tennis balls in a sock, and the physiotherapists largely will do those antenatal classes and talk about the different ways that maybe a partner or the person themselves can help in the early stages of labour while you're still at home or even when you're in the hospital.
Is the 2 tennis balls in a sock for the back? Yeah.
Or the heated gel packs.
Oh, yeah.
I can remember being sent in and out, and in the Royal Women's in Melbourne, there was a little, almost like one of those hot food cabinets that you might see those little jam bomb things in. And you just went out and you took a warmer gel pack and you held it to the lower back. I didn't know what I was doing, but someone had told me what.
It was the hot showers for me.
Hot showers.
Oh my goodness,
the birthing
oh
ball.
Yeah, it was
but
so good.
Have you thought about it? Because if you haven't thought about it, it's not all going to come flying in, and particularly afterwards. And this is what this lady said to me. So I just threw around those few things there. Let's just throw out a bit and see what settles with you. And then she asked me again about it the next time. Oh shit, I was looking into that now. And there's a little online course, a webinar that I'm going to do and see. And so I don't know what I'll end up doing, but I thought that might be a good idea. I said, great. So she came to me anyway for the 2-week check. And I said, well, how did everything go? And, I'd seen her quite a few times. So I suppose I knew some of her hopes and expectations. And we talked about those sort of things for the delivery. And it had gone absolutely not the way she thought it would. But she was ready.
I thought you were going to tell me, and it was an absolute dream.
No, and was it a normal delivery? Yeah. What a question to ask.
Oh, isn't it terrible to ask someone that? Because as if it's not normal if it comes out whatever way is normal, isn't that right?
So she came in but I talked about opening yourself up to accepting that, baby will decide what way, and there'll be a team that will help you make the decision or might make the decision for you if they really need to get baby out safely and to keep you safe. I said, so whatever decisions or plans you might have, and a lot of people will have a rough idea of a birth plan. I have not had one person who's had a postnatal plan. They're planning, and the labour goes on for hours, maybe days for some people, but it's the afterwards bit. So I want them to start thinking about that. So anyway, she came in and I heard the whole story, and that was part of that child's starting story and part of her story transitioning into being a new mother. And the dad was there, and we spoke all about that. And luckily at 2 weeks, you don't have a lot medically to do. So weight is one of the main issues. It's connect with them and see how things are going and hear the birth story and get the birth details, the weights and the lengths and the head circumference and all that. But it's to make sure that they're back at birth weight or very, very close to it, and to hear that things are okay and to pick up on any maybe early triggers that might alert you and that you might need to do something about. So it was all great. And she said, and do you remember we were talking about breastfeeding? And she said, I was there and they came in and they had the formulas. And I said, no. And she put out her hand, and I'm not against formula. I'm against babies. I'm for babies being nourished, however works. But I really was kind of excited when she said, no, I am choosing to breastfeed my baby. And it was great. And this is not for me to heap pressure on anyone who has not chosen to breastfeed or who has tried really hard and struggled and it hasn't worked for them at all, right? But I loved that it worked for her.
Yeah, and she was happy that it
and
had
that she
to,
was happy. And whatever way you feed your baby, feed your baby.
Mm-hmm.
But that was lovely. So they're the 2 questions that I asked them. Again, prevention. Can I prevent a problem down the line? I'm back to the circles and the wheels and the spokes.
And the 3 A's.
And the 3 A's. And it all does come back to prevention.
It really does.
Where am I now? And how can I prevent problems that might be genetically coming down that train line at me? Or am I sitting all day, like I am? And how will I counteract that by doing something?
Well, not with an electric bike. You won't. I tell you need to get a push bike.
Bit harsh. Yeah, I'm building up to it. Do you know what I do? So on the way to work, so that I can get there and not be a sweaty mess when I get there. So I use the assistance to get there. And I've pulled that back now I started off using the top turbo. And then underneath that was sport. And now I'm able to get there on tour.
On hairdryer. hairdryer mode.
So, and it's great.
I believe you, William. I'm just a little bit disappointed that you're not cycling in and out on a push bike. Okay, but that's okay. It's okay. Maybe the next time
you can work towards it.
You can work towards it.
But on the way home,
You go for it. But is that downhill? Admit it.
No.
Okay.
No, it's quite flat actually the whole way. Yeah. There's one downhill off the M50.
Okay.
But apart from that, it's reasonably flat.
Well, I have 2 questions for you now.
Yes.
So, what advice would you give young people today?
I thought about this one. I'm going to give you a brief. Well, sort of brief. My brief.
Nothing that you've given me today is brief. So I think
do
whoever's
briefs,
still listening knows what they're in for.
Okay. So, brush your teeth. Now, I could give you 10 minutes on that, but it's about the importance of nutrition and prevention. Nutrition is huge, particularly as we get older. Brush your teeth and look after your teeth. It sounds like, something a parent would say, and I don't want to fall into there he goes. Yeah. Brush your teeth and look after your dental hygiene. Visit your dentist and do all that as part of it. Wear SPF. And I think that's, going back to Baz Luhrmann and the Trust Me on the sunscreen. SPF is hugely important for so many reasons, from an aging viewpoint, aging of the skin, but also to reduce the risk of skin cancer. And I think that's just simple. And you can do it quite simply now. That's the second thing. Travel. Travel brought me to meeting my wife. Travel brought me so many wonderful, wonderful places and experiences and allowed me to become independent. Because things that I did in Australia, I moved to Australia on my own. I'd never been there before. I didn't know anyone there at the time. But I was like a year. I'm sure I'll manage a year. Lots of people have done it before. And I remember arriving out there going, what have you done? What have you done? You're really far away. And it was rainy and dark, which it almost never was. So travel, I think travel is hugely important. And if you're lucky enough to be able to travel and learn how you're going to do you and how you're going to be you and grow up. Travel, it opens your mind and you come back to Ireland and you see Ireland in a different way. You see the good and the bad and everything else. And you can compare because you've been away and seen how it's done. And maybe traveling on your own or in small groups, but doing that in years where you're developing your own independence. And this is reflecting a lot on my own experience, I suppose, but that's the question that's being asked. Travel, teeth, sunscreen, travel. I was asking my wife this. I said, what would I say? And I immediately came up with those 3 things because I think they're really key. I have 2 more. The last one is hers, and it's really sensible. The 4th one is choose to be kind. In my action space, I think you can choose your words. In recent weeks, a friend of mine standing at the children's football match on a Saturday morning happened to just, say this, and it was very much throwaway, but it's really stuck with me since. Probably one of the things that's stuck with me more than anything else in recent years. The words we speak become our home. I feel I could do a whole chat about that alone. The words we speak become our home, and I think they can become your prison too if you choose to allow that to happen. So choose to be kind. Choose that to put out there in your words, in your behaviour, in your interactions with others. And if you choose, people have said this in lots of different ways, put it out to the world. It's all the same thing. So to young people, choose to be kind, and kindness will definitely find you. And the last thing is, start a pension. And she was so right. I thought, that's a solid, good advice. Start saving, or, learn, like all my stuff is, brush your teeth, wear the sunscreen, travel, and choose to be kind. It's easy to maybe laugh and be silly saying those things. I do honestly believe they're the 4 things I would ask young people to do or advise them to do. But also maybe learn a little bit about how to save and how to start that from an early stage, because we want to keep you well into those older years, and you might need savings for that. You might.
You absolutely will. Sure, we're not replacing ourselves enough. And also, actually, on the pension note, there's so many women that don't have themselves set up for good pensions in particular.
But in those years where they're coming into adulthood, they have taken time off or found themselves in a space where they have stepped aside into this other lovely role of parenthood, and they maybe miss out on that career progression hasn't pointed them in that direction. They've lost out on the stepwise, and I'm no expert in all of that, but yeah, definitely. A lot of women have really missed out on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's the meaning of life?
I did struggle with this one. I thought about life in a lot of different ways, and I suppose we've talked about life here now and how I interact with it as a GP, how I interact with it with new parents when I speak to them. But for me, when I tried to think of an answer, one of the things that I was brought to was an experience a couple of years ago when we went to Clare with some really good friends for an overnight stay, a night away. And we went to the Burren. I'd never been before. And I really felt, and this is not something that I would have ever done before. I wouldn't have seen myself as a person who connected with nature enough. It wasn't a particular interest. I love being outdoors. I love nature, but I never felt connection. But I remember one of my closest friends, and she said, "Take off your shoes and walk out on that expanse of it over there next to some nice place we'd had lunch." And I was like, "No." I said, "Sure, well, why not?" And I remember, in a way, for me, living is activity. Life is growth. Life is activity. The lives we live, when we talk about them, it's all the things we do, all the actions of doing. And yet, for me, life is about connection with others through those actions, but also fundamentally and really importantly, connection with yourself. How do I learn to connect with myself? The middle A, the acceptance, finding peace with yourself, working out who you are, and connecting to yourself builds confidence, and it's certain to provide a more calm journey going forward. That I'm certain of. And I took off my shoes and I stood there feeling a little bit like a Blanca for a while. And I just thought, what can I take from this moment where all around me was life far older than me? And often it is in nature, much more than any of our individual lives. You have the trees that are hundreds of years old that people go and visit around the world. You have tortoises. So animals and nature have more of a lifespan than we do at times. So how can we choose our lives separate to life and the amount of time we have on the earth? How can we choose to do that well? How can we choose to do it kindly and sensitively to the environment in a way? But I remember just standing there in the Burren going, wow, this is really lovely. I'm having a lovely weekend. I was with lovely people. And I'm standing here really connected to the earth while connecting with other people, while connecting with myself. So what's the meaning of life? Connection, I think. I feel I could ramble for a long time, but I have connection and how you can find that connection.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I have a friend who says if she was ever on the podcast, that's what she'd say, connection.
Sorry.
William, it was absolutely... now William has stolen your line, okay? You have to think of something else. It's been a pleasure having you. It's been lovely. And I think that there's going to be so many people that get so much from this chat that we had. No, absolutely.
But I've got so much from it.
Well, great. And can you tell people where they can find you as well?
Yeah. So it's nestfamily.ie, and it's a structured 9-week program for postnatal, for new parents. So support and education, but informally delivered. People hear education and they go, "Oh, a class, is it?"
So you're not lecturing them. You're informing
it's not
them.
by PowerPoint. It's really quite lovely. And we start off with some of the lovely poetry from Maria Tempany, the rhyming one.
Oh, I love her.
And it's a lovely way to start. And it just sort of happened very organically. But yeah, nestfamily.ie, all the information is there. Me and somebody every week, women's health physios and baby massage therapists and pediatricians. And yeah. But I took time to think, who are the people that I would have? Pediatric dietitians, of all the different people that I think people will want to hear from. Each expert's in their own area. Me and them, a bit of poetry and kindness each week.
Fabulous. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very, very much.